A 6'11" stretch four was among the best high school players in Nevada. He's committed to Gonzaga as a walk-on. The Zags have done it again.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, make every moment more. It's the dog days of summer. The sports are not sporting like we want them to, but folks, this summer FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, we got a jam-packed show for y'all today. We are meeting new Zag walk-on Graydon Lemke, talking about him, his performance in high school, why he is not your typical walk-on for Gonzaga. We're also going to discuss Davis Fogle, who is having a monster run on the Rise circuit this summer, what it means for him, what it means for Gonzaga as well. We're going to discuss how the Summer League finished up for a trio of Zags and Anton Watson, Killian Tillie, and Drew Timme. And we'll also talk a little bit about Team Canada's scrimmage against France, how Andrew Nembhard, rocking the jersey here for those of you on YouTube, and Kelly Olynyk are doing with that team. But we start talking about Graydon Lemke. For those of you who are on the Discord channel, we had a great conversation about him, or I should say you all had a great conversation about him. One of the reasons I love the Discord channel is I saw a notification from a friend of mine that Gonzaga had secured a commitment from a player named Graydon Lemke, and I was like, oh, I wasn't aware of this, so I went to the Discord channel, and already, folks, there was a lengthy conversation between 5 or 6 of you talking about Graydon Lemke, talking about who he was, his high school stats, posting links to videos of highlights on him for just all sorts of fantastic stuff. It helps me learn about Graydon Lemke before recording the show. It's also a great reminder to those of you who are not in the Discord channel. If you want instant, rapid reaction to everything going on with Gonzaga basketball, in season, out of season, whenever, definitely join that Discord channel. Links in the show notes. It's completely free, and it gives you quality access and updates about Gonzaga athletics all the dang time. Here's the deal with Graydon Lemke. Here's why this is such a unique situation. A look at his stats and his performance definitely doesn't look like your typical walk-on player at the Division I level. Now, Gonzaga has had very talented walk-ons in the past. It's not like this is new. Colby Brooks was a very good high school basketball player in the Los Angeles area. Abe Eagle was 6'9" when he came to Gonzaga as a walk-on. We've had guys like Will Graves and Matthew Lang. Matthew Lang is playing professionally. Like, we have seen a lot of players come through the Gonzaga program, even just this year. We'll talk about the rest of the walk-on group, but Lemke is the third preferred walk-on for Gonzaga, and this group this trio of players is very, very talented. But Lemke is 6'11". That alone is unique for a walk-on player at the Division I level. 6'11" forward from Faith Lutheran High School in Las Vegas. He averaged 17 points a game this past year at his high school. He was the MVP of the league that he played in. He also shot and made 51 three-pointers last season as a 6'11" big man. Some reports indicate that he grew a lot in high school, which is kind of the Kelly Olynyk path. I want to be clear. I don't think Graydon Lemke is necessarily going to become Kelly Olynyk, but we are talking about a player who had guard skills, who had developed an outside shot as a 6'2", 6'3", whatever it might have been, player in high school, and then he grew to be a near 7-footer. That is what happened to Kelly Olynyk. It took Kelly a couple of years at Gonzaga to more or less just adjust to his body size, to being 6'11" when he was 6'2" just a couple of years ago. By the time he found his space, he obviously had the full redshirt year, and then he blossomed into a star. Again, not saying that's going to happen with Graydon Lemke, but we've seen this path before in a Gonzaga basketball uniform. Lemke was probably on track to be a ranked prospect A big thing that slowed him down was a torn Achilles, which happened his junior year of high school. So he has recovered from that. He's played his senior year. A report indicated from Jim Meehan of the Spokesman Review, who wrote up a nice little article about Graydon Lemke and his commitment to Gonzaga, indicated that Lemke is unlikely to play this year. I don't know if that was something he had heard specifically from a source, if he talked to Graydon himself, if it's just a projection based on the fact that a lot of players who walk on at Gonzaga don't play at all as freshmen. They end up getting into games a little bit later in their career. Colby Brooks is an example of that. Joaquin Reyes-Moore, who's on the roster last season, who did not play. Joe Few didn't play his first year. Like it's pretty common for walk-ons to not play. They don't play much ever, but to even get into games at all until they've been in the program for a year. So I'm not sure if there's a specific indication, or if I'd say if Lemke's still recovering from injury, but he played as a senior, so I don't think that is the case here. Lemke was also a finalist for the Naismith High School Courage Award. And unfortunately, the reason for that is that his father passed away in the June of 2022. And right around the same time, his mother was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Really tragic, horrible circumstances for the Lemke family. It's very cool that he was nominated for this award, this Courage Award, to continue playing basketball, to fight through a torn Achilles, to fight through losing his father, to fight through a serious illness for his mother, and continue to be a productive basketball player. Now he heads to Gonzaga, gets this opportunity to be a player for what's looking like a really deep and really talented Gonzaga roster this upcoming season. His older brother, Coleman, it's a WCC family affair. Coleman Lemke plays for the Portland Pilots. He's a redshirt junior forward at UP. He's been at 30 games in the last 2 years for UP. He hasn't played much, 5 minutes per game, just 1.2 points in the last 2 seasons. But it'll be nice to see these two brothers get an opportunity to face each other. We'll see if they both get into games at the same times. Frankly, if there's a team in the WCC where they both might have a chance to play against each other, it's probably against Portland, a team that doesn't look particularly good heading into next season. And like I said, Lemke is one of 3 preferred walk-ons for Gonzaga this upcoming season. All newcomers. You have Joaquin Reyes-Moore returning. You have Joe Few returning. You have 3 new walk-ons joining the roster. That is Cade Orness, a 6'3" guard from North Kitsap High School. Orness beat Davis Fogle. His team beat Davis Fogle in the Washington State playoffs this past year, the 2A level. Orness is one of the most prolific scorers literally in Washington high school basketball history. The other one is 6'9" forward Noah Haaland. He's from Lakeland High School in Rathdrum, Idaho. His father played at Gonzaga in, I think, the 90s. So there's a bit of a family situation there. And then again, you have Reyes-Moore and Joe Few. And the question I want to pose here before we move on to another topic, one of the questions I get very frequently in mailbag, we've talked about it a handful of times, could Gonzaga's backups, could a lineup of the non-starters for the Gonzaga Bulldogs, where would they place in the WCC? It's not could they win a WCC game? They'd win a whole bunch of WCC games, but is the second unit for Gonzaga the 3rd best team in the WCC, 5th best team, 7th best team? Like where would they place? We've talked about that a few times on the show, but now we have a 5-man lineup of walk-ons. Could the team of walk-ons win a game in the WCC? Again, you have a 6'11" starting center in Graydon Lemke, a legit prospect, a guy who absolutely, based on his profile, based on his pedigree, could play at the WCC level. You have a power forward in Noah Haaland at 6'9", solid junior college player, spent 2 years at the JUCO level, put up solid, decent numbers at that level. And then you have 3 guards, Cade Orness, again, like I said, one of the most prolific scorers in Washington State basketball history. Joaquin Reyes-Moore is 6'1". He was the 23rd ranked player in the Northern California area as a high schooler in 2022. He was first team MCAL in his division there. And then, of course, you have Joe Few. Joe Few played 15 games last year. When he was a senior at Gonzaga Prep, he averaged about 8 points a game. To answer the actual question, probably not. Probably not, because you have 3 guards. You don't have a wing player. Orness is 6'3", playing the small forward position. The fact that you're starting a 6'11" and a 6'9" guy when you're making a team of Gonzaga walk-ons is pretty incredible. And the fact that I don't think this team gets blown out in every game. We've seen Joe Few look like a competent basketball player against an NAIA opponent in Eastern Oregon. he did not fare very well when he would come in garbage time against even backup players at San Diego or Pacific or schools like that. So I think the guard play here would be suspect. We haven't seen Arayas more play. I don't want to assume that he's completely incapable of playing at this level because I don't know. He might be pretty good. We just haven't gotten a chance to see him yet. But I don't think this team would actually win WCC games, but if you're telling me they can't be competitive with a Pacific team or a Portland team that don't look to be all that great at this point in the offseason, I think they probably could. And the fact that they could even compete is insane. That is an insane thing to think about and really demonstrates the level of depth and talent that this Gonzaga roster possesses heading into the 24-25 season. And it's only going to get better because, folks, Davis Fogle, who's coming to this program in 2025, he looks so good. And like so many Gonzaga commits before him, he commits to Gonzaga and then he rockets up the rankings with an incredibly successful summer circuit leading into a senior year. We're going to talk about why he might be a future star for Mark Few and the Bulldogs coming up in just a second. I'll tell you about today's sponsor, FanDuel. Folks, I love sports. You love sports. We all love sports. That's why we're talking and listening to podcasts about sports in late July. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But it's the dog days of summer, and this is when we get fewer games. The sports are not sportsing like we want them to. However, FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app, dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. And we got the Olympics this year, huge reprieve from the doldrums of the summer sports cycle. Right now, Team USA minus 400 odds to take home the gold. Been a bit of a suspect performance for them in the scrimmages. So if you're maybe leaning somebody else taking that gold, Canada, easy team for Gonzaga fans to root for with Nembhard and Olynyk. They are next at plus 1,000 odds. France and Serbia, Filip Petrusev's squad, are next at plus 1,500. And if you're feeling really spicy, Rui Hachimura and Japan, they are at plus 50,000 odds to win that gold medal. If you want to toss a little bit down, see if you get lucky, see if Rui can do the unthinkable. You can watch the Olympics with a vested interest. All you got to do is head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. And folks, I want to thank all of you for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. And remind you, for your second listen, check out the Locked On College Basketball podcast. Did a really fun show on Tuesday, personally, talking about 10 transfer sophomore breakouts we might see in college basketball next year. My co-host, Isaac Shade, and our regular guest, Leaf Tulane, doing a fantastic show on Wednesday for you all. We got some really fun stuff coming up on Locked On College Basketball. Check it out if you have not done so yet. Wherever you find Locked On Zags, you can find Locked On College Basketball there as well. We got to talk Davis Fogle. Planning to lead with Davis Fogle for the show until we found out about the new walk-on Graydon Lemke. Got a great opportunity to talk about him and Gonzaga's walk-ons for this roster, but we got to talk about Davis Fogle. Currently the only player committed in Gonzaga's 2025 recruiting class. We know that they're pursuing other players who we will talk about momentarily, a few of them who has some updates on, but Davis Fogle right now is really starting to make his name for himself as a premier prospect in the 2025 class. He's already rocketed up the rankings. He moved up, I think, 30 spots at On3. He moved up like 20-something spots at 24/7 Sports, from being a non-top 100 to a borderline top 75 now. I think everywhere or most places have him in the top 40. Some places are kind of pushing him as a top 30 prospect. And he's doing everything he can to continue that rise. He carried his Seattle Select team in the Under Armour Rise circuit. They had a championship game, and Davis Fogle, all he did, dropped 43 in the championship game. Now, I'm not going to pretend to fully understand the entire hierarchy of these various summer circuit leagues. I do know from reading the article about this performance on 24/7 Sports that the Rise circuit is kind of considered tier 2 for like the premier summer circuit leagues and various different competitions. So he wasn't quite competing against the best of the best. The article I read was written by Brandon Jenkins, did a fantastic job. He basically said Davis Fogle is very clearly the best player in this second tier circuit. So he's playing with players who are not as good as him. And he showed it. 43 points in a championship game is ridiculous. And he was playing point guard for the Seattle Select team. We know he played point guard at Anacortes High School, but that's not really a surprise because he was heads and shoulders the best player on that team. So, of course, you're going to put the ball in the hands of your best player. That's more or less what happened here. But he's still competing against decent high school prospects, guys who are going to play D1 basketball next year. And he's 6'6", 6'7", he's playing point guard. And based on some of the highlights I watched, based on the review here, the write-up written by Brandon Jenkins, we saw a player who has more offensive versatility than maybe he's been given credit for. We saw a player who is improving in getting to the rim and finishing through contact. That was something he struggled with a little bit at Peach Jam. We talked to our good friend of the podcast, Tobias Bass, about that, and he said, yeah, we like the jump shot. It's pure. We like the decision making, but he struggled to finish through contact, struggled to score at the rim. He looked a lot better doing that in this game. I think he's starting to fill out, he grew like 3 inches in a very short period of time. So he's probably still kind of trying to find his size, find his balance, things like that. We saw an improved pull-up jumper. We saw great vision as a passer, and that very much interests me. His ability to distribute the basketball. He had some highlight reel passes, like the kind of passes that you got to rewind and watch that again because you're like, how in the heck did he see that? How did he make that play? And he had a couple of those in this championship game for Seattle Select. He also played great defense. He blocked a lot of shots. Probably not going to be a rim protector at the collegiate level. Obviously used his size advantage here, but the fact that he can do that, can step out and do that. He's a great positional rebounder. I think that'll carry over. Gonzaga has a rich history of guards who are plus rebounders for their position. The Joel Iais, the Julian Strothers, et cetera, et cetera. This is a strength that I think we'll see from Davis Fogle at the collegiate level as well. And I'm going to pull this quote directly from Jenkins's article at 24/7. He says, quote, "No one could ask more from a prospect with his status playing at that level this season." He did everything you could ask him to do. That's the effectively the write-up here, the conclusion on Fogle's performance with Seattle Select. Now, the big test, and I'm not saying this to be in any way like dismissive or concerned about Davis Fogle, but we need to see a lengthy stretch of games performed with players at his caliber. We haven't really seen that from him yet. Fortunately, we will, because he's going to play his senior year at Compass Prep, a very, very prolific high school basketball factory in Arizona. He will compete with the best of the best. He will play the best high school talent. He will be teammates with the best high school talent. Whether Compass Prep puts him at the point guard position or puts him off the ball is something I'm going to be very curious about. Because I don't think, he's not going to be a point guard right away at Gonzaga because they're going to have Braden Smith for his first 2 years, expectedly. That's the expected plan. You never know in college basketball, but that's the plan right now, is that Braden Smith's there for the first 2 years of Davis Fogle's career. So I expect Fogle to play off the ball at Gonzaga. But we also know that Mark Few loves playing multiple point guards. So if Fogle can play point guard, if he plays an effective point guard position at Compass Prep, if he's their lead guard, facilitating, running the point, that is just gravy for Gonzaga. That's a great win for them. But if he doesn't, that's great too, because then he's going to be more familiar with playing in an off-ball role. There's not really any losing here other than just him having a disastrous season, which feels very unlikely with how he has played up to this point. So if he plays point guard, it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to play point guard at Gonzaga. I think it just means that Mark Few might have his highly coveted second point guard in the lineup, a secondary ball handler, somebody who can kind of create off the dribble if they need him to. If he plays off the ball, that just means he's more ready for that role when he gets to Spokane in 2025. A couple other quick recruiting things I want to hit on here. Julius Halafinoa officially reclassified from 2025 to 2024. That basically takes him out of the running for being a Zag. He was not going to come to Gonzaga. It was never really felt like a super serious connection between the two schools. Gonzaga had reached out. He mentioned that Gonzaga reached out, but he's been kind of on the radar for Virginia Tech and Xavier a lot more than that. Him reclassifying to 2024 just means Gonzaga doesn't have any scholarships left. So he's not going to come. He's not going to walk on like Graydon Lemke did. So if you've been hearing about Julius Halafinoa, if you're curious the update on him, expect to see him in a different uniform next year. And then last, I want to talk about Kingston Fleming. We've talked about Kingston Fleming already when we found out that he's going to be at Craziness in the Kennel in October. Gonzaga's bringing him in. He's a 2025 prospect, 21st ranked player in the 2025 class at 24/7 Sports. 6'3" point guard. He's from San Antonio. A lot of different programs are in on him. Houston, Texas, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, SMU. There are also programs recruiting him who are not from the state of Texas. That's just the Texas area ones, but he's got a lot of attention. And I bring him up here because I got a direct message from Sean, who is a Gonzaga fan, who's watched him a lot, who's competed against him. He's a high school basketball player, competed against Fleming. And he sent me a really long, very detailed, nice message talking about Kingston Fleming. So I'm going to read some of what he said in this message with his permission, of course, because I thought it gives some valuable insight into Kingston Fleming from somebody who's competed against him for many years. Here's the direct quote from Sean. Quote, I've played against Kingston my entire life. I'm also a 2025. He earned his 5-star ranking. He has been the best player on one of the best teams in Texas since his sophomore year. He was humiliating Power 5 committed seniors when he was a sophomore in the state quarterfinals games. He makes everyone on his team look better. His burst is elite. He was one of the top sprinters in the U.S. as a 12-year-old. Would be a huge get for the Zags. Opening up recruiting in Texas is bigger than most people in the Pacific Northwest realize. Dallas has many/more NBA players than any city in the world. Want to shout out Sean for giving us an update here. This is what you'd expect. You love to see this for Gonzaga, them recruiting in Dallas, in Texas area. I know Fleming is from San Antonio, but recruiting in Texas in general is good for Gonzaga. And we've talked about Drew Timme. Obviously, that's a huge, huge get for Gonzaga. It was, he's the most prolific scorer in the school's history, but it does open up their ability to recruit in Texas. Right now, Gonzaga, 5 of their top 50 recruits of all time have come from Texas, but only one of them really made the impact at Gonzaga that we were hoping for. That was, of course, Drew Timme, who's ranked 6th. Dimitri Goodson, GJ Villarino, Guilan Rieti, and Memory Diallo are the other 4 who have come from Texas to Gonzaga. There's some other kind of connections. Jeremy Jones wasn't a recruit, but he obviously was from Texas before he came to Gonzaga. So we've seen this before, but for Gonzaga continuing to get into the Texas market, continuing to recruit players like Kingston Fleming, even if they don't get him, is a huge win for them. Hopefully things go great at Craziness. He considers seriously coming to Gonzaga. He would be a tremendous addition for that 2025 class. Him and Davis Fogle, immediately impactful players for that team. With Braden Smith, my goodness, that team is going to be absolutely stacked if they can land Fleming. Folks, we're going to move on from our recruiting conversation and talk Summer League because, folks, it's wrapped up. Anton Watson, Killian Tillie, Drew Timme, they are done with their Summer League performances. They all finished on a high note. We're going to talk about that and whether they did enough to land a guaranteed NBA roster spot, all coming up in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. Closing out the show today, wrapping up our Summer League conversation. Been talking about it pretty consistently throughout the last couple of weeks as third segment stuff, talking Drew Timme, Anton Watson, Killian Tillie. Had some great talks about Julian Strother in the 2 games that he played in the Summer League where he absolutely dominated, averaged 28.5 points in those 2 games. But want to wrap up our 2 members of the Boston Celtics. First, Anton Watson, who was, of course, selected 54th overall by Boston in the 2024 NBA draft. In his final game with the Celtics in Summer League, Watson dropped 15 points with 4 rebounds and 3 assists. He played about 27 minutes in that game, 6 of 12 from the field, 2 of 5 from beyond the arc, 1 of 1 from the free throw line. Overall for Watson, played in 5 games with Boston, averaged about 25 minutes per game, averaged 11.8 points, 5.2 rebounds, 1.6 assists, and 1 block per game. He shot 51.1% from the field. But more importantly, in 4 3-point attempts per game, so 20 total 3-point attempts, Anton Watson shot 35%, 7 for 20. 4 3-point attempts per game, 35%. Not elite, but it's pretty darn good. And it's what Boston wanted to see from Anton Watson. They wanted to see him space the floor. They want him to be a prototypical 3-and-D wing in the NBA. Defensively, he can be that. He is good enough to be a versatile perimeter defender. He's a switchable big defender. If you're playing him at the small ball 4, he can switch onto guards. He's going to struggle with the super big physical guys, but I always think it's, this happened a lot with Chet Holmgren. We're like, oh, well, how's Chet going to guard Nikola Jokic? Has anybody figured that out? Like, it's an unfair comparison. Yeah, Anton Watson's not going to be good guarding Nikola Jokic or Victor Wembanyama or guys like that, but that's not what Boston's going to ask him to do. If Boston's asking him to guard a similar small ball 4 and be switchable onto guards, he's capable of doing that. And if he can hit open threes, he's not even taking pull-up threes, contested jumpers, anything like that. Stand in the corner, hit open threes, attack closeouts when they come to him, defend well at multiple positions. That's an NBA career right there. And Anton Watson did what they needed him to do in Summer League to get that role at the next level. He also shot 85% from the free throw line. That's a big deal. It's a small sample size, but it's a big deal because Anton Watson spent 5 years at Gonzaga being consistently bad at free throws. Is that erased by one 5-game sample where he shot 85%? No, of course not. But it's a positive sign. It's a positive sign for him. I think the odds of Anton Watson getting at least a 2-way contract, if not a regular NBA contract for Boston, are 60-ish%. Still not great. Still this is a really good, deep team. And unfortunately, Watson is competing with one of his former teammates in Killian Tillie for one of those final roster spots. I think Boston's going to give him a spot. Might be a 2-way contract, but I think they're going to find a spot for him. Unfortunately, that lowers the odds of Killian Tillie getting an NBA spot. For his most recent and final game in the Summer League, Tillie put up 7 points, 6 boards, 1 assist, and 1 steal. He played about 21 minutes in that game. He was 3 of 5 from the field, 1 of 2 from beyond the arc. In 5 total games for Boston, Tillie played about 17 minutes per game. And I put the minutes per game because I think it shows who Boston is really trying to get a good look at. Obviously, Watson played 25, 26 minutes per game. That's a really good sign that they wanted to see a lot of him out there. You expect that from draft picks. For just a random guy they signed in Killian Tillie, who they didn't have a strong connection with, for him to have played 17 minutes a game is a pretty good sign that they really wanted to get a look at him to evaluate whether he was a fit for one of their final roster spots. Tillie averaged 8.5 points a game, about 4 boards, about a block a game, shot 48.5% from the field, but he did shoot 41.2% from 3. That was on 3.4 attempts per game. That's what Killian Tillie is there to do. Hit threes. That's what he's good at in college. That's what he was good at with the Memphis Grizzlies. That's what he's good at here. That is his role. He can do more than that. He's not he's not only good at one thing, but that's the skill set that teams want when they sign a Killian Tillie type, is they want a floor spacing power forward. 41% on 3.5 attempts per game. That's going to get it done. I still am not as confident about Killian Tillie's odds, certainly of making the Boston Celtics, but he's not signed to Boston. They don't own his rights in any capacity. Any NBA team can sign Killian Tillie. The odds of that happening to me, pretty close to 50-50. I think they're a little lower than that. I think he's probably going to have to, if he chooses to, stay in the G League as an unsigned player and just play in the G League and hope that somebody signs him. I think that's probably a little bit more likely than him getting a 2-way or a standard NBA contract, but it also wouldn't shock me if that happens for him either. Next up, Drew Timme, of course, the big fella. Final game with the Sacramento Kings, 14 points and 7 boards. He tacked on 2 assists as well. Played about 16 minutes. He was 6 of 7 from the field in this one, including 0 of 1 from 3, which means he made all 6 of his 2-point field goal attempts, missed that 1 3, went 2 of 3 from the line in that one. In 5 games in Las Vegas, and Timme also played in the California Summer League as well with Sacramento, but in his Las Vegas Summer League experience, Timme played 5 games, played about 20 minutes a night, averaged 11.5 points, 4.5 boards, 1.6 assists, 1 steal per game. He shot 63% from the field. He shot 73% from the free throw line. Both those numbers feel pretty familiar. Unfortunately, he shot 14% from the 3-point line. Again, we celebrate Watson and Tillie having good percentages there while acknowledging that it was a small sample size. So with Drew Timme, we also acknowledge that it is a small sample size, while also acknowledging it's not good. It's not good. 14%. I mean, obviously it's just not good in general, but it's not good for him. It's a skill set that teams really want to see from him. And in game situations, he hasn't been able to demonstrate it. And in this situation, 14%, he knocked a few down, but he didn't knock down the amount that I think would have really helped him get more attention from NBA scouts. Played in the California League, like we said, he had a 10-point, 10-rebound game against Team China. He had some other productive performances there, but ultimately, the concern about Drew Timme defensively persists in terms of his lateral mobility, his verticality, his ability to contest shots at the rim, his ability to be a switchable defender, not really there in a significant way. And without the ability to space the floor, I still think there's a role for him. I've talked about this on the show. I think his connecting ability, he can set screens. He can be a pick and pop guy on mid-range jumpers. He can put the ball on the deck and attack the basket. He's a great passer. I think there's a lot of versatility to his game offensively, not just a back to the basket, give him the ball and let him, make a post move. He can do more than that. that, but without consistency as a three-point shooter, without a lot of defensive versatility, it limits the amount of teams that would be willing to roster him. I think his odds of starting this season in the NBA are pretty slim, under 20%. His odds of being on a two-way contract are a little higher, but even then, I still think there's probably about a 70% chance that Drew Timme goes into this season playing in the G League unsigned, hoping that he can, have enough of a strong performance at that level to get signed some point as the year goes on. Last thing I want to mention here quickly, we've got a lot more Olympic coverage coming your way as the games get underway later this week. But Team Canada won a scrimmage over France. That's a big deal for Team Canada to prove that they are on the, they've continued to have the second highest odds of winning a gold medal besides Team USA. But now they're really starting to look like that second best team in this Olympic Games. They beat France. Kelly and Nembhard both had fantastic games. Kelly went 14 points on 6 of 7 shooting, including 2 of 3 from deep. Nembhard had 10 points and 5 assists on 5 of 8 shooting. Both these guys look great. There was a really fun highlight. If you haven't seen it yet, I posted it on the Locked On Zags Instagram account. Check that out if you have not done so yet. Kelly made an entry pass to Andrew Nembhard, down on the block. As soon as Nembhard caught it, he basically caught it and then immediately flipped it behind his back on a bounce pass to Kem Birch, who was cutting on the other side. Birch caught it and dunked it in one fluid motion. Beautiful play. Really fun to see 2 Zags involved in an exciting play like that. And like I said, I can't wait for the Olympics. That's what we're going to be talking about throughout the next couple of weeks as we get into Olympic coverage. We'll talk about Team USA and Mark Few's connection there. We'll talk about Team Canada and Olynyk and Nembhard. We'll talk about the Japanese team and Rui Hachimura, the Serbian team, and Filip Petrusev. We'll talk about the women's Canadian team and Yvonne Ejim and how she's doing. All sorts of fun coverage coming on the Zags in the Olympics in the next couple of weeks here on Locked On Zags. That's going to wrap it up for me today. Folks, get ready for that Olympic coverage. We're also going to keep you up to date on anything going on the recruiting trail, get you up to date on the Summer League guys as training camp rolls around for the NBA. All sorts of fun stuff coming your way here on Locked On Zags. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so yet. Join the Discord channel. Follow on Instagram. All that good stuff. We'll be back on Wednesday or on Thursday with a new episode here of Locked On Zags. Don't miss it. Thanks again, and until next time, as always, go Zags.